The storage wings smelled like dust and forgotten things. Daniel Reed pushed his cleaning cart down the narrow corridor, watching the overhead lights flicker in patterns that made his eyes hurt. 3 months into his internship at the Galactic Conservation Institute, and they still had him doing grunt work. Not that he minded much. Everyone had to start somewhere. His supervisor BRYX had 8 arms and used every single one of them to point out Daniel's mistakes. The Quellen had made it clear that humans were probationary members of galactic society. Fragile, slow, barely worth the oxygen credits. Daniel had learned to nod and smile and do whatever task got thrown his way. Today's assignment involved cataloging abandoned equipment in Section 7. Nobody had been down here in cycles, maybe years. The Institute kept expanding into newer wings, leaving places like this to gather cobwebs and mystery stains. Daniel's tablet beeped as he scanned each container, logging serial numbers that nobody would ever check. He was halfway through the 3rd row when he heard it. A sound so faint, he almost missed it beneath the hum of ventilation systems. Something between a whimper and a chirp. Daniel froze, tilting his head to listen. There it was again, coming from behind a stack of specimen crates near the back wall. Daniel squeezed between the containers, his tablet light cutting through the darkness. The sound grew louder, more desperate. He moved aside a plastic tarp and stopped breathing. Curled in the corner, barely bigger than a house cat, was a creature he recognized from the Institute database. A dragon. An actual, living dragon hatchling. Its scales were dull gray instead of the vibrant colors he had seen in photos. The creature's ribs showed through thin skin, and its eyes held a terror that made Daniel's chest ache. When their gazes met, the hatchling pressed itself harder against the wall, releasing a high-pitched keen of pure fear. Daniel dropped to his knees slowly, setting the tablet aside. His mind raced through everything he knew about Dracarii dragons. Apex predators, highly intelligent, strictly controlled species due to their potential danger, and absolutely not supposed to be shoved in a storage wing like broken furniture. The hatchling's breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps. Its small wings were folded tight against its body, trembling with each exhale. Someone had put it here. Someone had hidden this creature and left it to starve. That Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to project calm, even though anger burned hot in his gut. The hatchling was watching him with those enormous eyes, trying to decide if this new threat would be the one that finally ended its suffering. "Hey there," Daniel whispered. The hatchling flinched at his voice, but didn't flee. "Nowhere left to run. I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." The words felt stupid and inadequate. The creature couldn't understand English. But Daniel kept talking anyway, letting his tone carry what his vocabulary couldn't. He had grown up around animals on his family's farm in Oregon. Horses, dogs, even a few barn cats that had started out feral. They all responded to patience and consistency that he noticed the identification tag attached to a nearby crate. His tablet translated the alien script. Specimen 47. Dracarii hatchling. Status: failed to thrive. Disposition: pending review. The date stamp was 4 months, old. 4 months. This baby had been alone in the dark for 4 months. Daniel's decision crystallized in that moment. He didn't care about protocols or galactic regulations or what BRYX would say. He pulled off his jacket and laid on the floor between them. The hatchling's eyes followed the movement, but it still didn't approach. "I'll be back," Daniel said softly. "I'm going to get you some food and water. Real food, not whatever they were feeding you before. Just hold on a little longer." He stood slowly, backing away to give the creature space. The hatchling watched him go, its expression unreadable. Daniel grabbed his cart and headed for the exit, his mind already planning. He would need to smuggle supplies down here without anyone noticing. Figure out what Dracarii hatchlings actually ate. Research their care requirements. But first, he needed to finish his shift without BRYX realizing something had changed. Daniel forced his expression neutral as he emerged into the main corridor. 2 Saurine guards passed him without a glance. Just another forgettable human doing forgettable work. Perfect. Daniel dumped his card in the maintenance bay and clocked out early, claiming a headache. He stopped by the Institute cafeteria and pocketed several protein bars and a bottle of water. Not ideal, but it would do until he could research proper nutrition. The commissary next, where he bought jerky and dried fruit with his own credits. Night shift started at 1800 hours. The storage wings would be completely empty then. Daniel returned to his tiny quarters and pulled up everything the Institute database had on Dracarii biology. The files were extensive but heavily redacted. Most information was restricted to senior researchers. What he could access painted a picture of incredibly complex creatures with emotional intelligence, rivaling most sentient species. Point 1 section caught his attention. Dracarii hatchlings required bonding within their first 6 months of life. Without it, they became feral and dangerous. The bonding process involved specific vocalizations from a caregiver. The text referenced additional documentation that Daniel's clearance couldn't access that he sat back, staring at his screen. 6 months. How old was that hatchling? How much time did they have? His comm unit buzzed. BRYX wanted him in the lab early tomorrow for inventory. Daniel acknowledged the message and checked the time. 2 hours until night shift began. 2 hours until he could get back down there, that he gathered his supplies and try not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Harboring an undocumented Dracarii was probably illegal, definitely against Institute policy. But the image of those terrified eyes wouldn't leave his mind. Nobody else was coming. Nobody else had found that hatchling in 4 months. If Daniel walked away, it would die alone in the dark. Not acceptable. Daniel tucked the food into his work bag and headed out. The corridors were quieter during shift change, most staff heading to recreation areas or their quarters. He nodded to a few familiar faces but didn't stop to chat. Section 7's access panel accepted his credentials without issue. The storage wing stretched before him, dark and silent. The hatchling was exactly where he'd left it, still pressed against the wall. But its eyes tracked him as he approached, and Daniel noticed it had moved slightly closer to his abandoned jacket. A tiny sign of curiosity overcoming fear. Daniel knelt in the same spot as before, moving slowly and deliberately. He opened the water bottle and poured some into a shallow container he had brought. The sound made the hatchling's nostrils flare. Definitely thirsty, he slid the container forward and retreated. The hatchling stared at the water for a long moment before creeping forward on shaky legs. It drank in desperate gulps, pausing only to watch Daniel for signs of threat. When the container was empty, the creature looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. Daniel smiled and reached for the jerky. 5 days passed in a rhythm of secrecy and small victories. Daniel split his time between pretending to be a mediocre intern and sneaking supplies to Section 7. The hatchling, still nameless, had started waiting for him near the entrance to its hiding spot. Progress. The creature ate everything Daniel brought. Protein bars, jerky, even the vegetables he smuggled from the cafeteria. Its scales had started showing faint hints of blue and silver beneath the dull gray. The ribs didn't show quite as much anymore. Small changes, but Daniel celebrated each one that he had taken to talking during his visits. Mostly nonsense about his day or stories from Earth. The hatchling would tilt its head, watching his mouth form words it couldn't understand. Sometimes it made small chirping sounds in response. Daniel liked to think they were having conversations. On the 6th day, reality caught up with him. BRYX cornered Daniel in the equipment bay. 3 of its 8 arms crossed while the others gestured irritably. The Quellen's skin had shifted to an angry orange color that meant trouble. Your productivity has declined 17% this week, BRYX said, shoving a data pad toward Daniel's face. You're also accessing restricted areas during off hours. Explain. Daniel's stomach dropped, but he kept his expression neutral, just trying to be thorough with the cataloging assignment. Some of those storage wings are pretty messy. BRYX's eye stalks narrowed. The system shows you entering section 7 9 times in 6 days. The same section. What are you doing down there? Found some interesting old equipment, Daniel said, hoping his voice sounded casual. Thought I should document it properly. The lie felt thin, even to his own ears. BRYX clearly didn't buy it either, but the supervisor just huffed and waved him away with 2 arms while typing on a tablet with 2 others. Section 7 is scheduled for security inspection in 3 days. I suggest you finish your thorough documentation before then. Daniel's blood turned cold. 3 days. They would find the hatchling. They would take it away, or worse. His mind raced as he stumbled through the rest of his shift, barely registering the tasks BRYX assigned him. That evening, Daniel bypassed his quarters entirely and went straight to the Institute library terminal. He needed unrestricted access to the Dracarii files. The senior researcher passwords were impossible to crack, but Daniel had watched enough people type their credentials to know a few patterns. He tried combinations for 20 minutes before getting lucky with Dr. Shellix's account. The full files opened before him, and Daniel started reading. His hands shook as the truth became clear. Dracarii hatchlings bonded with their first consistent caregiver through a specific phrase spoken in their native language. The bonding created a permanent psychological and emotional link. Without it, hatchlings became violent and unpredictable by their 7th month. Failed bonding attempts resulted in mandatory termination. The regulations were clear. A Dracarii that couldn't bond was considered too dangerous to exist. Daniel found the audio files for the bonding phrase buried deep in the archive. He played it through his earpiece, listening to the complex series of sounds. It wasn't just words. The phrase required specific tonal changes and rhythm patterns that human vocal cords might not even be capable of producing. He played it again and again, try to memorize not just the sounds but the feeling behind them. The translation scrolled across his screen. You are not alone. You are seen. You are cherished. Simple words carrying the weight of survival. Daniel practiced in the empty library, earning strange looks from a passing maintenance bot. His pronunciation was terrible. The sounds came out flat and awkward compared to the recording. But he kept trying, adjusting his throat position and breathing until something resembling the correct tones emerged. Hours passed. His voice grew hoarse. The library lights dimmed for night cycle, but Daniel stayed hunched over the terminal, playing and replaying the audio. He recorded himself and compared it to the original. Still wrong, but getting closer. A message flashed on his comm unit. BRYX again, demanding he report for early inventory tomorrow. Daniel deleted it and kept practicing. By the time he made it to Section 7, his throat burned and his eyes felt gritty from exhaustion. The hatchling was waiting as always, but something was different. It ventured closer than before, sniffing the air near Daniel's outstretched hand. When he opened the food container, the creature ate directly from it instead of waiting for him to retreat. Trust. They were building actual trust. Daniel settled against the wall, and the hatchling surprised him by curling up within arm's reach. Not touching, but close. Closer than ever before. He could hear its breathing, steady and calm. So different from that first terrified keening. I learned something today, Daniel said softly. The hatchling's ear twitched toward his voice. There's a way we can be family. Real family. Not just me sneaking you snacks in the dark. But I have to say the right words, and I'm not sure I can say them correctly. The hatchling made a low sound, almost like a purr. Daniel reached out slowly, and this time the creature didn't flinch away. His fingers touched smooth scales, and the hatchling pressed into the contact. Starved for affection as much as food. I'm going to try, Daniel promised. We've got 3 days before security comes. 3 days to figure this out. I won't let them take you. He spent the next hour practicing the bonding phrase while the hatchling dozed. His pronunciation improved slightly, but doubt gnawed at him. What if he got it wrong? What if his human accent made the words meaningless? What if 3 days wasn't enough time? The hatchling stirred and looked up at him with those enormous eyes. In them, Daniel saw something beyond animal intelligence. He saw understanding, hope, the fragile belief that maybe this strange creature really would keep its promises. Daniel returned to his quarters near dawn, his mind churning. He needed more time with the audio files, more practice, but BRYX would be watching him now, suspicious of his behavior. And the security inspection loomed like a deadline he couldn't negotiate. He fell asleep, still whispering the phrase, trying to burn it into his memory. You are not alone. You are seen. You are cherished. The words felt heavy with responsibility, a promise he might not be able to keep. The next 2 days blurred together. Daniel maintained his work duties, while every spare moment went to the hatchling. It had grown more active, even playful. Sometimes it would grab his jacket sleeve gently in its teeth, tugging like it wanted to play. Other times it would make those chirping sounds and bob its head, clearly trying to communicate something. Daniel brought better food, real meat from the commissary that cost half his weekly credits. The hatchling devoured it and made happy rumbling sounds that vibrated through its entire body. Its scales had brightened considerably, showing beautiful patterns of blue and silver that shimmered in the dim light. On the evening before the inspection, Daniel arrived to find the hatchling agitated. It paced in circles, wings fluttering with anxiety. The creature kept looking toward the corridor entrance and making distressed sounds. You can sense something's wrong, Daniel realized. You know tomorrow is different. The hatchling pressed against his legs, trembling. Daniel sank down and wrapped his arms around the small body. The creature buried its head against his chest, and Daniel felt wetness on his shirt. Were those tears? Did dragons cry? I won't let them hurt you, he whispered fiercely. I swear it. We're going to do this tonight. I'm ready. I think I'm ready. But was he? The phrase still felt clumsy in his mouth. Not quite right. Missing some essential quality that would make the bond take hold. Daniel pulled back and looked into the hatchling's eyes. Trust me one more time, he said. Just one more leap of faith. Can you do that? The hatchling chirped softly and touched its nose to his forehead. Daniel closed his eyes and felt something shift in his chest. An awareness of the creature's emotions. Fear, yes, but also trust. Hope. Love for this strange human who had chosen to see it as more than a failed specimen. Daniel took a deep breath. Daniel knelt on the cold floor of Section 7, his heart hammering against his ribs. The hatchling sat before him, perfectly still except for the slight tremor in its wings. They had been preparing for this moment all evening. Though the creature couldn't possibly understand what was about to happen, he had practiced the phrase hundreds of times. Recorded himself, compared it to the original, adjusted his pronunciation until his throat ached. But now, facing those trusting eyes, doubt crept in like ice water through his veins. What if he failed? What if his human vocal cords simply couldn't produce the right sounds? What if tomorrow the security team arrived and found an unbonded hatchling? The creature chirped softly and bumped its head against Daniel's knee. The gesture said everything. I'm here. I trust you. Try. Daniel placed his hands gently on either side of the hatchling's head. Its scales felt warm beneath his palms. He could feel the rapid pulse of its heartbeat through that thin membrane. Both of them were terrified, he realized, both standing at the edge of something that would change everything. Okay, he whispered in English first. Here we go. He opened his mouth and began. The sounds came from deep in his throat, each syllable requiring a shift in tone and pitch that felt unnatural to his human anatomy. But he pushed through, letting the phrase flow. The words for "you are not alone" came first, pitched high and sustained. Then the tonal drop for "you are seen," rough and resonant. Finally, the rising melody of "you are cherished," ending on a note that made his vocal cords strain. The hatchling's eyes went wide. Its whole body stiffened, and for a terrible moment Daniel thought he had heard it somehow. Then the creature made a sound he had never heard before. A deep, harmonious note that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. Its scales began to glow, bioluminescent patterns emerging in swirls of blue and silver light. Daniel felt it then. A rush of emotion that wasn't his own. Joy, relief, recognition, love. The feelings poured into him through some connection he couldn't name. His vision blurred with tears as the bond snapped into place, solid and permanent as steel. The hatchling, no longer just a creature, but a person with a name that appeared in Daniel's mind like a gift, pressed forward. Ryan. Its name was Ryan. Daniel laughed and cried at the same time, wrapping his arms around his bonded companion. Ryan's wings spread and folded around them both, creating a cocoon of scales and trust. They stayed like that for long minutes, adjusting to the new awareness of each other. Daniel could feel Ryan's hunger, not for food, but for the affection that had been denied so long. He could sense the creature's, no, Ryan's intelligence, sharp and curious, desperate to learn and grow and experience everything this strange human could teach. Ryan pulled back and looked at Daniel with new understanding. The fear was gone from those eyes, replaced by fierce devotion. Through their bond, Daniel felt Ryan's memory surface, being pulled from its nest too early. Loud voices and rough handling. The cold, sterile laboratory where researchers had tried and failed to bond it with other predator species. The crushing loneliness when they gave up and shoved it in storage like defective equipment. Rage flooded through Daniel, hot and protective. Nobody would ever treat Ryan that way again. He would make sure of it. A sound echoed down the corridor. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Daniel's head snapped toward the entrance, and Ryan's wings flared defensively. Through their bond, he felt Ryan's instant shift to protective mode. The hatchling might be small, but its instincts screamed danger. The footsteps grew louder. Daniel stood, positioning himself between Ryan and the corridor. His mind raced. The inspection wasn't supposed to happen until tomorrow. Had BRYX moved up the schedule? Had someone detected his unauthorized access to the research files? Light flooded the storage area. Daniel squinted against the sudden brightness as figures emerged from the corridor. BRYX led the group, followed by two security officers in full armor. Behind them walked a tall Serene in commander insignia. Daniel's stomach dropped. That was Commander Torval, the station's chief of operations. Step away from the creature, BRYX ordered, all 8 arms gesturing urgently. Slowly, Daniel. Don't make any sudden movements. Daniel didn't move. Ryan pressed against his legs, making a low warning sound that vibrated through the floor. The security officers raised their weapons, and Daniel felt Ryan's terror spike through their bond. Not again. Not more people trying to hurt them. I said step away. BRYX repeated, skin shifting to a deep red. That is an unbonded Dracarii. It's extremely dangerous. No, Daniel said, his voice surprisingly steady. Ryan is bonded. To me. Just now. The bond is complete. Commander Torval stepped forward, his reptilian features unreadable. Impossible. Humans cannot bond with Dracarii. The physiological requirements alone make it biologically implausible. And yet here we are, Daniel said. He held out his arm, and Ryan climbed up to perch on his shoulder. The hatchling's weight was comfortable, familiar. Through their bond, Daniel sent waves of calm. We're okay. I thought you'd BRYX's eye stalks quivered with agitation. This human has been accessing restricted files and harboring an undocumented specimen. I demand immediate confiscation of the creature and disciplinary action. His name is Ryan, Daniel said firmly. And you can't confiscate a bonded Dracarii. It's against galactic law. I checked. Torval's expression shifted slightly. Interest, maybe? The commander approached slowly, studying Daniel and Ryan with calculating eyes. Prove it. Prove the bond is genuine. Daniel had no idea how to prove something that existed in his heart and mind. But Ryan did. The hatchling's scales lit up in complex patterns, pulsing in rhythm with Daniel's heartbeat. Then Ryan began to sing. The same bonding phrase Daniel had spoken, but transformed. Ryan's voice wove the melody with harmonics that made the air shimmer, and Daniel found himself singing along without conscious thought. Their voices merged, human and Dracarii, creating something beautiful and impossible. When the song ended, silence filled the storage wing. Even the security officers had lowered their weapons, staring in what looked like awe. BRYX's skin had faded to a pale, shocked yellow. Commander Torval nodded slowly. I see. This complicates matters considerably. What happens now? Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice from shaking. Torval exchanged glances with BRYX. Now you both come with us. There will be a formal inquiry. The Galactic Council will need to verify this bond and determine its legal status. Until then, you and the Dracarii are confined to secure quarters. Together, Daniel said quickly. We stay together. I'm not letting you separate us. That remains to be seen, Torval replied. But for now, yes. Together. Cool me. Daniel felt Ryan's anxiety through their bond, but also curiosity. The hatchling had spent months hidden in darkness. Whatever came next, at least they would face it in the light. Daniel scratched behind Ryan's ear, receiving a happy chirp in response. They followed the commander into the corridor, leaving the storage wing behind. Daniel's jacket still lay crumpled on the floor, forgotten. He didn't look back. That chapter was over. Whatever happened now, they had each other. The bond thrummed between them, solid and real. Ryan nuzzled against Daniel's neck and sent a simple emotion through their connection. Safe. Finally, after so long, Ryan felt safe. Daniel smiled despite his fear of what was coming. They had cleared the first impossible hurdle. They would clear the next ones too. Together. That was the whole point of bonding, after all. Nobody faced anything alone anymore. The corridor stretched ahead, bright and uncertain. Security personnel whispered as they passed. News was already spreading through the station. A human had bonded with a Dracarii. An impossible thing had happened in a forgotten storage wing. Daniel squared his shoulders and kept walking. Let them whisper. Let them stare. He and Ryan had just rewritten the rules of what was possible. And they were only getting started. The secure quarters were nicer than Daniel's regular room, which seemed wrong somehow. They had been locked in here for 6 hours while the station buzzed with activity outside. Through the single window, Daniel watched ships coming and going, each one probably carrying news of the impossible bond. Ryan sat curled in his lap, drowsing but never fully asleep. Too much uncertainty in the air. Daniel's comm unit had been confiscated, along with his access credentials. They were prisoners in everything but name. BRYX had made that clear before leaving them here. The Quellen's parting words still echoed in Daniel's mind. You may have bonded with that creature, but you stole Institute property and violated a dozen regulations. Don't expect mercy. Ryan stirred, sensing Daniel's worry through their bond. The hatchling bumped its head against his chest, offering comfort. Daniel smiled and stroked the smooth scales. At least they were together. That was worth whatever came next. The door chimed and slid open. Commander Torval entered, followed by a Dracarii adult that made Daniel's breath catch. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters long with scales that shimmered deep purple and gold. Its eyes held ancient intelligence that pinned Daniel in place. This was what Ryan would become someday. Powerful, beautiful, and utterly terrifying. Ryan leaped from Daniel's lap and froze, wings spread in instinctive submission. The adult Dracarii approached slowly, lowering its head to sniff the hatchling. A rumbling purr emerged from its chest, and Ryan relaxed fractionally. Through their bond, Daniel felt confusion and awe. Ryan had never seen another of its kind before. This is Dr. Shellix, Torval said, gesturing to the adult Dracarii, the station's leading expert on Dracarii biology and bonding. I've asked them to assess your situation. Dr. Shellix spoke, and Daniel's translator implant rendered the complex sounds into words. Remarkable. The bond appears genuine, though I confess I don't understand the mechanism. Human neurochemistry should be incompatible with Dracarii bonding processes. But it worked, Daniel said. That's what matters, right? Dr. Shellix tilted their head, studying him with unnerving intensity. Perhaps, or perhaps you've created something unstable that will fail catastrophically. Dracarii bonds are meant to last decades. Can human lifespan support that? The question hit Daniel like a physical blow. He hadn't thought about that. Ryan could live for centuries according to the files. What happened when Daniel aged and died? Would Ryan be left alone again, bonded to a memory? Through their connection, Ryan sent fierce determination. Together, always together. The hatchling didn't care about decades or centuries. Right now was what mattered. We'll figure it out, Daniel said, more confidently than he felt. Humans are good at adapting. Indeed, Dr. Shellix said dryly. Your species does have a certain stubborn persistence. Very well. The Council has agreed to formal testing. You must demonstrate that your bond meets the legal definition of a legitimate Dracarii pairing. If you fail, the hatchling will be removed from your custody and placed in a proper facility. And if we pass, Daniel asked, then you accept full legal responsibility for a Dracarii? Torval interjected, including liability for any damage or harm caused. Given that Ryan will eventually grow larger than most shuttlecraft, that's considerable risk. Daniel looked down at the small creature pressed against his leg. Ryan gazed back with complete trust. The risk seemed abstract compared to that reality. I accept. The testing begins tomorrow, Dr. Shellick said. I suggest you rest. The challenges will be rigorous. After they left, Daniel sank onto the provided bed. Ryan climbed up beside him, and they lay together in the dimming light. Through their bond, questions flowed. Were tests? Will they hurt? Daniel did his best to explain, sending reassurance along with the information. They were a team now. Whatever the tests required, they would face them together. Sleep came in fits and starts. Daniel dreamed of dragons and fire, of flying through stars on wings that weren't his own. He woke to find Ryan's dreams bleeding into his, creating a strange shared space between sleep and waking. The hatchling was dreaming of its nest, of warmth and siblings it barely remembered. The loneliness in those memories made Daniel hold Ryan tighter. Morning arrived too quickly. Guards escorted them to a large testing chamber filled with equipment and observation windows. Behind the glass, Daniel recognized faces. BRYX, Torval, Dr. Shellick, and at least a dozen other officials he didn't know. All here to judge whether a human could truly bond with a dragon. The first test involved physical coordination. Dr. Shellick explained that bonded pairs moved in synchronization, responding to each other without verbal communication. They had to navigate an obstacle course together while separated by a transparent barrier. Ryan on one side, Daniel on the other. That IT should have been impossible. Daniel couldn't see Ryan's path, and the hatchling couldn't see his. But through their bond, he felt Ryan's movements. When the hatchling turned left, Daniel's body moved left. When Ryan jumped, Daniel jumped. They completed the course in perfect mirror, and Daniel heard surprised murmurs from the observation deck. The second test hurt. They were separated into different rooms, far enough apart that their bond stretched thin like pulled taffy. The pain was immediate and sharp, a physical ache that made Daniel gasp. Through the connection, he felt Ryan's panic and distress. The test lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes of agony that felt like hours. When they brought them back together, Ryan launched into Daniel's arms, shaking. Daniel buried his face in the hatchling's neck and breathed through the lingering pain. Separation trauma is consistent with legitimate bonding, Dr. Shellick noted clinically. Proceed to the next test. The next test required displays of dominance. Traditional Dracarii bonding involved the larger, stronger partner establishing authority through physical prowess. They wanted to see Daniel demonstrate control over Ryan through strength. Command the hatchling to perform tasks. Enforce obedience, Daniel refused. That's not what our bond is. I'm not Ryan's master. We're partners. Dracarii require structure and hierarchy, Dr. Shellick argued. Without clear dominance, the creature will become unmanageable as it grows. Then I guess I'm doing it wrong, Daniel said flatly. He turned to Ryan. What do you want to do? Ryan chirped and began performing an elaborate aerial display, looping and diving through the testing space. The hatchling was showing off, and the pure joy radiating through their bond made Daniel laugh. This was Ryan's choice, not commanded, but freely given. The observers conferred among themselves. BRYX's skin had gone a confused brown color. Even Dr. Shellick seemed uncertain. This is highly irregular. Humans bond differently, Daniel said. We don't demand obedience. We build trust. Maybe that's why I could bond with Ryan when nobody else could. I wasn't trying to dominate. I was trying to connect. Torval leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. An interesting hypothesis. But can such a bond provide the control necessary to prevent a fully grown Dracarii from causing harm? Ask Ryan, Daniel suggested. Through our bond, I can feel intent. If Ryan ever wanted to hurt someone, I would know instantly. And Ryan would feel my response. We keep each other honest. Empathy as a control mechanism, Dr. Shellick's mused. Unconventional, but potentially more effective than traditional dominant structures. The creature would self-regulate to maintain the bond's harmony. Exactly, Daniel said, relieved someone finally understood. We're not controlling each other. We're choosing to consider each other in every decision. That's what bonding means to humans. The testing continued for hours. Memory exercises where they had to recall shared experiences. Emotional regulation tests where Daniel had to remain calm while they deliberately stressed Ryan. Problem-solving tasks that required coordination between human hands and dragon claws. Each challenge revealed new dimensions of their bond. Not perfect, but real and growing stronger. By the time they finished, Daniel was exhausted. Ryan had fallen asleep on his shoulder, small body warm and trusting. The observers filed out without comment, leaving only Torval and Dr. Shellick's. The results are inconclusive, Dr. Shellick's admitted. Your bond clearly exists and shows remarkable depth, but it follows none of the established patterns. I cannot definitively say whether it will remain stable long-term. How long before you decide? Daniel asked. Torval and Dr. Shellick's exchanged glances. The council convenes tomorrow for final deliberation. Until then, you remain in custody. I'm sorry, but given the unprecedented nature of this situation, we cannot take chances. They left Daniel and Ryan alone again. The hatchling woke briefly, nuzzled against Daniel's neck, and went back to sleep. Through their bond, Daniel felt nothing but contentment and security. Whatever the council decided, Ryan trusted completely that everything would be okay. Daniel wished he had the same certainty. Daniel woke to find Ryan staring at him from inches away, eyes wide with concern. Through their bond, he felt the hatchling's anxiety before his own mind fully processed it. Today was Judgment Day. The Galactic Council would decide their fate, and there was nothing they could do but wait. Breakfast arrived via a service bot. Bland protein paste that tasted like cardboard, but Daniel forced himself to eat. He needed his strength. Ryan picked at the food Daniel offered, more interested in grooming Daniel's hair with gentle claws. The gesture soothed them both. Physical contact made the bond sing stronger, chasing away some of the fear. The door chimed at exactly 900 hours. Two guards Daniel didn't recognize stood waiting, their expressions professionally blank. The council is ready. Come with us. The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Tiered seating rose in a semicircle around a central platform where Daniel and Ryan stood exposed to dozens of eyes. He recognized Commander Torval and Dr. Shellick's among the assembled officials. BRYX sat near the back, skin a nervous green. Other faces belonged to species Daniel had only seen in databases. Representatives from across the galaxy, all here to judge whether a human and a dragon could be family. Quellan in ornate robes, clearly senior to BRYX, called this session to order. We are here to determine the legal status of the bond between human Daniel Reed and Dracarii, hatchling designated Ryan. Dr. Shellick's, present your findings. The large Dracarii rose, scales glinting under the chamber lights. My assessment reveals a genuine bond by all measurable criteria. Neural synchronization is present. Emotional resonance exceeds baseline parameters. Separation trauma manifests appropriately. However, the bonding mechanism remains unexplained. Human biochemistry should not support Dracarii attachment processes. The long-term stability is therefore uncertain. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A crystalline being near the front spoke up, its voice chiming like wind through glass. If the mechanism is unknown, how can we validate its permanence? Dracarii bonds are meant to last lifetimes. A temporary attachment would be worse than no bond at all, which is precisely why removal to proper facility care is the logical solution. BRYX interjected, standing with 4 arms raised. The human meant well, but lacks the expertise to maintain this relationship. The Institute has resources specifically designed for cases like this. Daniel's hands clenched. He forced himself to speak clearly, projecting confidence he didn't feel. With respect, those facilities are exactly where Ryan was when I found them. Starving and terrified in a storage wing because your experts decided they had failed to thrive. I didn't fail, Ryan. You did. The accusation hung in the air. BRYX's skin flushed dark orange with anger, but several council members nodded thoughtfully. A mammalian representative with thick fur and kind eyes leaned forward. The human makes a valid point. The Institute's care resulted in near death. The human's care resulted in bonding. Perhaps we should examine why traditional methods failed where unconventional ones succeeded. Because I didn't try to dominate Ryan, Daniel said, warming to his argument. I offer companionship. Humans understand something that maybe other species don't. We know that the strongest bonds come from choice, not control. From mutual respect, not hierarchy. A pretty speech, Dr. Shellick said, not unkindly. But pretty words don't address practical concerns. When Ryan reaches adult size, they will possess strength capable of tearing through bulkheads. Without proper restraint protocols, the risk to station safety is considerable. Ryan had been quiet throughout the proceedings, perched on Daniel's shoulder. Now the hatchling launched into the air, wings spreading wide. The sudden movement made several council members flinch. Guards reached for weapons. Daniel felt Ryan's intent through their bond and held up a hand. Wait, just watch. Ryan flew in graceful circles around the chamber, scales glowing in beautiful patterns. The hatchling sang, not the bonding phrase, but something new, a melody that spoke of joy and freedom and the security of being truly seen. As Ryan sang, images flowed through the bond into Daniel's mind and somehow, miraculously, into the minds of everyone present. They saw what Ryan had experienced. The cold laboratory. The researchers who had viewed the hatchling as a specimen, not a person. The crushing isolation of the storage wing. Then Daniel appearing, offering water and food, and something Ryan had never received before. Kindness without expectation. The choice to care simply because it was right. The song ended, and Ryan returned to Daniel's shoulder. Silence filled the chamber. Daniel looked around and saw several council members wiping their eyes. Even BRYX seemed shaken, skin pale with emotion. The crystalline being spoke first, its voice softer now. I had not realized Dracarii possessed such sophisticated communication abilities. To share memories telepathically requires considerable cognitive development. Ryan is not a pet, Daniel said firmly. Not a specimen, not a creature to be managed. Ryan is a person who deserves the same rights and dignity as anyone in this chamber. Our bond isn't some biological accident. It's a relationship built on mutual respect and love. If you separate us, you're not protecting anyone. You're just causing harm to someone who has already suffered too much. The human speaks with passion, Torval observed. But passion does not guarantee competence. Daniel Reed, you are an intern. Your credentials are minimal. Your resources are limited. How do you propose to care for a growing Dracarii? They require specific nutrition, environmental conditions, and medical attention. Daniel had thought about this during the long night. I'll learn. I'll work with Dr. Shellix and any other experts willing to teach me. I'll do whatever it takes. And I'll accept full responsibility for Ryan's actions. If that means I'm liable for damages or face consequences for any problems, I agree to that. But I won't abandon my family. Family, Dr. Shellix repeated, tasting the word. An interesting choice. You truly see this as a familial bond rather than a guardianship. Yes, Daniel said without hesitation. Ryan chirped agreement, nuzzling against his cheek. The furry council member stood. A motion that we recognize the bond as legitimate and binding. The human has demonstrated commitment beyond what regulations require. More importantly, the Dracarii has chosen this bond freely. To forcibly break, it would violate the principle of sentient autonomy we claim to uphold. I second the motion, Torval said, surprising everyone. The commander fixed Daniel with a stern look. But with conditions. Daniel Reed will submit to regular evaluations. Any sign that the bond is weakening or that Ryan poses unmanaged risk will result in immediate intervention. Additionally, you will work with Dr. Shelix to document this bonding process. If human-Dracaryi bonding is possible, the galaxy needs to understand how and why. I agree to all conditions, Daniel said quickly. As do I, Dr. Shelix added. This represents unprecedented research opportunities. I would be honored to work with both of you. The vote proceeded quickly. Not unanimous, but decisive. 14 in favor, 6 opposed, 3 abstaining. The Quellen in ornate robes struck a chime. The motion passes. Daniel Reed and Ryan are hereby recognized as a bonded pair with full legal standing. This session is concluded. Daniel's knees went weak. Ryan launched from his shoulder and did a victory loop in the air, singing with pure joy. The sound made several council members smile despite themselves. When Ryan returned, Daniel caught the hatchling and held on tight. Through their bond, relief and happiness flowed in waves. They had won. Actually won. BRYX approached as the chamber emptied, moving with unusual hesitance. I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. I saw a fragile human doing menial work and assumed that was all you were capable of. But you saw a person where I saw a problem. That took wisdom I clearly lack. Daniel blinked in surprise. Thank you. That means a lot. The Institute would like to offer you a new position, BRYX continued. We need someone to develop cross-species bonding protocols. Someone who understands that compassion matters as much as procedure. Interested? Very, Daniel said, grinning. A real job, not just an internship, and one that might help prevent other creatures from suffering like Ryan had. Dr. Shelix joined them, scales gleaming. We have much work ahead. Ryan will need proper nutrition immediately. I've taken the liberty of ordering supplies delivered to your new quarters. Considerably larger than the secure room, I assure you. New quarters? Daniel asked. You can't raise a dragon in an intern dormitory, Torval said, appearing beside them. We've allocated family housing in Section 3. 3 rooms, reinforced walls, and a private landing pad for when Ryan learns to fly properly. Consider it part of your employment package. Everything was happening so fast. Daniel's head spun, trying to process it all. A job, real housing, permission to keep Ryan. They had gone from prisoners to pioneers in a matter of hours. Ryan chirped happily and sent a simple feeling through their bond. Home. They had a home now. A real one. Together. Daniel scratched behind Ryan's ears and smiled at the assembled officials who had gone from judges to unexpected allies. When do we start? Immediately, Dr. Shelix said. There's a young Dracaryi being transported from the outer colonies. Another failed bonding case. I thought perhaps you two might help. Daniel looked at Ryan, and through their bond felt the hatchling's eager agreement. They had been saved. Now they could save others. That was what family did. The new quarters felt enormous after months in a cramped intern dormitory. Daniel stood in the main room, still amazed that this space was actually theirs. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed station harmony, spreading in all directions, ships gliding past like fish in a vast ocean. Ryan perched on the reinforced beam Dr. Shelix had installed specifically for dragon use. Wings spread to catch the sunlight streaming through the glass. 3 weeks had passed since the council hearing. 3 weeks of intensive training with Dr. Shelix, learning everything from Dracaryi nutrition requirements to the complex social structures of dragon culture. 3 weeks of settling into his new role as cross-species bonding specialist, a title that still felt surreal whenever someone used it. But the work was real. Vitally real. Daniel's desk held files on 4 other Dracaryi, hatchlings currently in Institute custody, all of them labeled as failed bonding cases, waiting in storage or specialized facilities for decisions about their futures. And yesterday, Dr. Shelix had dropped another piece of information that had kept Daniel awake most of the night. There may be more, the large Dracaryi had said, scales flickering with concern. Across multiple stations and facilities. Hatchlings that didn't respond to traditional bonding methods, deemed too risky to release or adopt out. Your success with Ryan has prompted inquiries from 7 different sectors. They all want to know if humans might be the solution they've been missing. Now Daniel stared at those files, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a physical thing. One human couldn't bond with dozens of dragons. The logistics alone were impossible, never mind the emotional toll. But he couldn't just ignore them either. Somewhere out there, more hatchlings like Ryan were waiting in the dark, convinced they were defective and unlovable. Ryan dropped from the beam and glided over, landing on the desk with practiced grace. The hatchling had grown considerably in 3 weeks. Better nutrition and consistent care showed in bright scales and developing muscle. In a few months, Ryan would be too large to perch on shoulders. In a year, too large to fit in standard doorways. Daniel tried not to think about what 5 years would bring. Through their bond, Ryan sensed his troubled thoughts. The dragon nudged the files with a careful claw, then looked up with questioning eyes. Daniel smiled and stroked the smooth scales, just thinking about how to help them. All those other hatchlings who need what you found. Someone to see them as people, not problems. Ryan chirped and sent an emotion through their connection. Not alone. We help together. Together, Daniel agreed. Always together. His comm unit chimed. Dr. Shellix's icon appeared on the screen. Daniel, we have a situation. The hatchling from the outer colonies has arrived early. It's in very poor condition. I need your assistance immediately. Daniel grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Ryan launched into the air, following. They had done this twice before already, helping Dr. Shellix assess other struggling hatchlings. Once they had successfully facilitated a bond between a hatchling and a serene security officer. The other time, the hatchling had been too traumatized, requiring long-term therapeutic care before bonding could even be attempted. The medical bay was chaos when they arrived. A hatchling larger than Ryan thrashed in a containment field while 3 staff members struggled to sedate it without causing injury. Dr. Shellix stood at a safe distance, scales dark with worry. Its name is Skyra, Dr. Shellix said as Daniel approached. 5 months old, removed from parents due to their deaths in a mining accident. 3 failed bonding attempts. The last caregiver was injured badly enough to require surgery. The transport crew kept it sedated the entire journey. Daniel watched Skyra fight against the containment field, seeing not aggression but pure terror. The hatchling scales were mottled gray-brown, dull like Ryan's had been, eyes wild and unfocused. Every movement screamed trauma and desperation. Has anyone tried just talking to it? Daniel asked. Of course not. One of the staff members said, incredulous. That thing tried to bite through someone's arm. Because it was being attacked, Daniel said sharply. From Skyra's perspective, everyone is a threat. Nobody has shown up just to help. He turned to Dr. Shellix. Can you lower the containment field? I want to try something. Daniel, that's extremely dangerous. This hatchling is much larger and stronger than Ryan was when you found them. I know, but look at those eyes. Skyra is dying inside. One more failed attempt, and what happens? Storage? Termination? Dr. Shellix's scales flickered through several colors. Finally, reluctant agreement settled in. Very well, but I'm maintaining emergency protocols. If anything goes wrong, the field goes back up immediately. The containment field dissolved. Skyra dropped to the floor, sides heaving with exhaustion. The hatchling's head swung toward Daniel, lips pulling back to show sharp teeth. A warning growl vibrated through the bay. Daniel sat down slowly, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. Ryan landed beside him, adding their presence to the equation. 2 dragons now, one clearly at ease with this strange human. Hey, Skyra, Daniel said softly. I know you're scared. I know everyone has hurt you or tried to control you. I'm not here to do either of those things. I'm just here to listen. Skyra's growl faltered. The hatchling stared at Ryan, confusion replacing some of the fear. Here was another Dracarii, relaxed and unafraid. Here was a human speaking without commanding. Nothing made sense in Skyra's broken worldview. Daniel began to talk. Not the bonding phrase, just stories. He told Skyra about Earth, about growing up on a farm with animals who had also been scared at first. He talked about Ryan's rescue, about the storage wing, and the long journey to trust. He made no moves towards Skyra, demanded nothing, just offered his voice and presence. An hour passed. Then two. The medical staff watched in stunned silence as Skyra slowly relaxed, the aggressive posture melting into exhaustion. The hatchling's eyes never left Daniel's face, drinking in every word. Slowly, so slowly, Skyra crept closer, not close enough to touch, but no longer pressed against the far wall. Ryan began to sing. Not the bonding song, but something gentler. A lullaby, Daniel realized. Something from Ryan's genetic memory of nest and safety. Skyra's eyes widened, and a small sound emerged. A chirp, tentative and broken, but real. Doctor. Shellick spoke in a hushed whisper to the staff. I've never seen this approach work before. The human isn't trying to bond or control. He's just being present. That's what they need most, Daniel said without looking away from Skyra. Someone to witness their pain without trying to fix it immediately. Someone to say, I see you suffering and you're not alone in it. By hour 3, Skyra had fallen asleep within arm's reach. Daniel hadn't touched the hatchling, hadn't pushed for connection, just sat and talked until Skyra's exhausted body finally surrendered to rest. Through his bond with Ryan, Daniel felt his dragon's pride and approval. This was what bonding was supposed to be. Choice. Time. Patience. Dr. Shellick approached quietly. What happens now? Now we find Skyra a human caregiver, Daniel said. Someone patient and gentle. Someone who understands that healing takes time. I can't bond with Skyra, but I can teach someone else how to try. You've already identified a candidate. Daniel nodded. There's a human maintenance worker named Lisa who applied to transfer to xenobiology studies. I've seen her with the smaller station animals. She never forces interaction, just waits for them to come to her. I think she would be perfect. Over the next week, Daniel worked with Lisa to introduce her to Skyra. The hatchling remained cautious, but responded to Lisa's gentle consistency. They didn't rush toward bonding. Instead, they focused on building trust one day at a time. Lisa brought food and sat reading aloud, letting Skyra get used to her presence. Slowly, the hatchling's scales began to brighten. The wild fear in Skyra's eyes softened to watchful curiosity. Daniel watched them together and felt hope bloom in his chest. This could work, not just with Skyra, but with all those other hatchlings waiting in the dark. They didn't need one miraculous human who could bond with dragons. They needed many humans willing to see beyond species, beyond fear, beyond what regulations and protocols dictated. Commander Torval summoned Daniel to his office on the 8th day. The Serene gestured to a chair and pulled up a holographic display. Your work with Skyra has drawn significant attention. I've received 43 requests from various stations asking for human volunteers to work with troubled Dracarii. The Galactic Council is considering a formal program. That's good, right? Daniel asked. Potentially, but it requires resources, training, oversight, and more humans willing to take the risk you took. Torval's eyes fixed on Daniel. They want you to head the program. Full authority to recruit, train, and deploy human caregivers across the galaxy. It would mean leaving Station Harmony. Constant travel. Considérable danger. Daniel thought of Ryan, growing stronger and happier every day. Thought of Skyra, learning to trust again. Thought of all those other hatchlings still waiting. What about Ryan? We can't be separated for long. The bond doesn't allow it. Ryan goes with you. The two of you become the proof that cross-species bonding works. Your partnership is the foundation this program builds on. Through their bond, Daniel felt Ryan's instant agreement. Adventure, purpose, helping others like us. The dragon's enthusiasm was infectious. I'll do it, Daniel said. On one condition, every human volunteer must understand this isn't about control. It's about connection. We're not training dragon tamers. We're facilitating relationships between equals. Agreed, Torval said. When can you start? Daniel smiled. Tomorrow. There's a hatchling on Station Nova 7 that's been in isolation for 6 months. I think we should begin there. That evening, Daniel stood in his quarters, packing supplies for the journey ahead. Ryan perched on the beam, watching with bright, excited eyes. Their bond thrummed with shared anticipation. This was bigger than either of them had imagined when Daniel had found a terrified hatchling in a storage wing. Dr. Shelix stopped by to deliver additional files and supplies. The large Dracarii paused at the door, scales showing respect. You've changed everything, you know. The galaxy thought it understood bonding. You proved we knew nothing. Thank you for that. I just listened, Daniel said. Turns out that's all Ryan needed. No, Dr. Shelix corrected gently. You saw a person where others saw a problem. You offered choice where others demanded compliance. That's not just listening. That's wisdom. After the doctor left, Daniel sat on the floor, and Ryan joined him, curling into his lap despite being almost too large. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching ships drift past the windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new hatchlings to help. But tonight, they had this moment of peace. You are not alone, Daniel whispered, the bonding phrase that had started everything. You are seen. You are cherished. Ryan's scales glowed softly in response, and through their bond came the same words reflected back. The dragon had learned to think in human concepts, just as Daniel had learned to feel in dragon emotions. They had met in the middle, building something entirely new. Tomorrow, they would teach the galaxy that the greatest strength wasn't in domination or control. It was in the willingness to see another being's pain and say, I'm here, I see you, and you matter. That was how bonds were really formed. That was how families were built. One patient moment at a time. One choice to care. One word spoken at exactly the right time to someone who desperately needed to hear it. Together, Daniel and Ryan would spread that message across the stars.